Okay, even Julia Kristeva, in her own writing, when she writes her novels, she uses intertextuality, and probably more so because she is the mother of intertextuality. We're going to start with the cover, and this is the English cover, so you should be able to recognize a couple of things. Think about what their meaning is and what their intertext is. First, we have the infinity symbol in the eye. So if you recognize that as the infinity symbol or the symbol for infinity, you think about maybe the eye is the window to the soul, so the soul is infinite. The birds, what could the birds mean? These are the type of questions I ask in the classroom. So we see birds in this pattern, it's usually because they're migrating. So people moving from one place to another. Then at the top we see an airplane, a sword. It looks like a car of some sort. A sword and a gun. So we definitely know that there's going to be travel and violence. We also see in the background where the car, the airplane, the swords are, is a yellow strip behind the person, and that indicates a halo in Eastern Orthodox Christian art. So the person that we see standing in front of us must be a saint. The person is wearing a head covering. Is it because it's a nun from a religious order or possibly a Muslim? So we're definitely going to have religious issues. We're going to have issues dealing with possibly the soul. We're going to deal with traveling. And we're going to deal with violence. And honestly, I've never read this book, but the cover is giving you those intertexts. You can put the pieces together just through intertextuality. So in one scene, we have an anchor woman with a platinum blonde crew cut, the local version of Laura Croft or Anna Nova, was announcing with an affected stutter in her voice, blah, blah, blah. And journalists have nicknamed this unusual serial killer number 8, mouthed the TV Barbie with her full red lips. And so in red, you have the intertext. Most people right away would recognize Laura Croft. And so again, when we see the local version of Laura Croft, if you don't know who Laura Croft is, you have no idea who this anchor woman would look like, behave like, etc. But if you know who Laura Croft is, you know exactly what this anchor woman looks like and what she acts like. Same thing with the Barbie. Then we have a very particular view. I don't care what age you are, everyone knows who Barbie is. So here we have Barbie, everything that brings to the table, and just by saying a TV Barbie, she doesn't have to give us any more description. We have everything we need in our head now to fill in the blanks about what this woman looks like. The one thing she does give us as a specific description is her full red lips. So it's obviously somewhat sexualized by putting her in makeup and red lips, etc. And here, I'll just tell you that Laura Croft from the video game Tomb Raider, and Anova, computer simulated anchor woman, Barbie, popular children's toy. So again, if you don't know who one of those people were, for example, Anna Nova, I had no idea. So I did recognize Laura Croft. So I would assume that Anna Nova is somewhat similar to a Laura Croft by the use of or Anna Nova. So I was able to piece that together based on what I know of Laura Croft, and again what we know of Barbie. So it allows you to, as a creator of some type of cultural medium, to skip steps because you rely on the person knowing what you're talking about. And this has been done for hundreds of years. It's not that suddenly Julia Kristeva discovered something that no one knew about. People were doing it, but they didn't have a name for what they were doing. They were just, using something else to remind you of something. And she's the one who sat down, studied it, put a name to it, tried to figure out how it works, also how it works in our psychology, in our mind. What is our brain doing when we see or hear these terms? How does that help us? Because she is a psychoanalyst as well. So that was the important questions for her. We're not in conclusion yet, but the concept of intertextuality has affected nearly every art form. It's all over the place now. You'll hear it in your English classes, you'll hear it in other places. And I did want to go up here for a second. Must not have programmed this right. I apologize. Intertextuality has come to influence many forms of today's art, as I've said. And her mentor, Roland Barthes, announced the death of the author and the birth of the reader. And that really impacted her as well, but that also impacts us, because that's a concept that we, depending on your bent, take for granted. And what he said in The Death of the Author is that we don't need to know anything about the person who wrote the book, who made the film, who created the painting. All we need is that object in front of us. When I read a book, I don't sit and research the life of the author to know how I should interpret the book. I read the book and I put meaning into it based on my personal experiences. And that's what Barthes did. Prior to his announcing, quote-unquote, the death of the author, university professors would teach you to read, and that there was a right answer. There was a right way to read the book, and you would get a certain answer. And because of that, you would only need to, or you would need to focus in, for a lifetime, for a career. We had professors who were experts on one book. Some were one author, but it was always that there was an answer to be had if you read enough and knew enough about the person. And then he comes along and says, no, it really doesn't matter. Maybe in the academic world it does, but in real life, we don't care about or need to care about the person who wrote it. We just need to be able to understand it, link it with our own experiences so it creates a meaningful interpretation, that we're able to get something out of it. And so this was an important aspect that came along. And final thing on this one, I want to show you this image. So can you see the intertext here? I know we haven't watched this episode yet, but there's several different intertexts because it's not really the moon, but it's obviously meant to be the moon, to represent the moon, and have the earth in the background. So we have a very specific intertext there, and then we have the Doctor Who intertext on top of it, because it turns out that it is a former theme park. So it has a place set up to look like the moon, and then the Doctor who travels through time and space lands on the moon. So two different intertexts that we put into it. But again, if you don't recognize, the American flag flying that like that in zero gravity, you wouldn't have it. I mean, with the Earth in the background, you should be able to figure out that it is supposed to be the moon. But because the moon landing is so iconic, that it's easy to reproduce that because we automatically recognize it and fill in the pieces. Okay, and that's the end of information about intertextuality.